Yo, what is up, guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, this video is a quick preview and prediction for Otto Wallin versus Dominic Breazeale. Now, this fight goes down on February the 13th on a Showtime card. Actually takes place on the undercard of Adrian Broner's return. Now, in my opinion, this is a relatively interesting heavyweight fight, a battle of the fringe contenders, I guess you could say. Otto Wallin most notably gave Tyson Fury one of the hardest fights of his career. Going into that fight, he was an unknown prospect, and he made a name for himself in defeat. People since that fight against Tyson Fury have been wanting to see Otto Wallin back in the ring, basically to really see how good this guy is. Was that just a flash in the pan, or is this guy genuinely a contender in the heavyweight division? And as for Dominic Breazeale, of course, for Dominic Breazeale, he's a strong guy, he's a tough guy, he's a durable guy, and he is a two-time heavyweight title challenger. He is limited. We know exactly what Dominic Breazeale is about. Let's be honest, he's not the most skilled guy in the world, but he does bring pretty good pressure. He's got pretty good punching power. He's a strong guy and he's relatively durable. We know what Dominic Breazeale is about at this point. If you're a prospect and you're not good enough, Dominic Breazeale can expose you, just like he did against Izu, the Nigerian prospect based out of Poland back in the day. But if you're good enough, you're going to beat Dominic Breazeale, and that is the question mark here. How good is Otto Wallin? Is he a genuine contender, or did he just have one good night against a unmotivated Tyson Fury? That is the question, but it is a pretty good fight in my opinion. But anyway, let's briefly touch on the tail of the tape. I guess we shall start with the favourite, Otto Wallin. Otto Wallin has a record of 21 wins, 1 defeat, 0 draws. 14 of those 21 wins coming by way of knockout. Dominic Breazeale has a record of 20 wins, 2 defeats, 0 draws. 18 of those 20 wins coming by way of knockout. Otto Wallin is listed as 6'5.5" with a 78-inch reach, whereas Dominic Breazeale is listed as 6'7" with an 81.5-inch reach. Is the size difference going to play a factor on fight night? Potentially, who knows. Otto Wallin is 30 years old, whereas Dominic Breazeale is 35 years old. Otto Wallin is a southpaw, whereas Dominic Breazeale is an orthodox fighter. So that is the tail of the tape. Dominic Breazeale, certainly the bigger guy. I know Otto Wallin is listed as 6'5.5", but to me he looks a bit smaller than that. I would say closer to 6'4". So Dominic Breazeale certainly has the size and weight advantage going into this fight. But in terms of the pro experience, both guys have fought the same amount of fights, 22 fights. I would say Dominic Breazeale has fought the higher level of competition. Otto Wallin has really only fought Tyson Fury at the elite level, whereas Dominic Breazeale has fought Deontay Wilder, he's fought Anthony Joshua, and he's even fought sort of hot prospects like Izu and the dangerous kind of fringe contender Amir Mansour. So Dominic Breazeale's fought a higher level of competition. I would certainly say he's more experienced in the professional game. However, in those fights, Dominic Breazeale took a lot of punishment, so despite these guys having the same amount of fights, Otto Wallin, in my opinion, is the fresher fighter going into this fight, and again, that could be a factor. But now the tail of the tape is out of the way, let's briefly break down the fight, what I believe each guy should do, and we'll go from there. But yeah, I guess we'll start with the underdog, Dominic Breazeale. Dominic Breazeale, let's be honest, I can't expect this guy to jab and move or do something elaborate. Dominic Breazeale is what he is. He's a big lump who tries to utilise his size, his strength and his power and his durability. And that's what he needs to do in this fight. Otto Wallin, I've seen a few Otto Wallin fights. He's a good technical boxer out of that southpaw stance, but he's clearly not a physical guy. He's not really a big puncher. He's fairly strong, but he's not the most physically daunting heavyweight in the world. Dominic Breazeale needs to do what he does best. He needs to ask questions and make this a real rough and physical fight. He really needs to get on top of Otto Wallin and ask questions. Get on top of his chest and land those clubbing short punches. And yeah, try and really make this a war, because ultimately, let's be honest, Dominic Breazeale's not a good boxer. It's pointless me asking him to do things that we know he's not capable of. He needs to fight his usual fight. He needs to be aggressive, he needs to be rough, he needs to land those power shots, he needs to swarm, he needs to make Otto Wallin extremely uncomfortable. That's his MO in this fight, that's his MO in every single fight. One thing I noticed about Otto Wallin, when Tyson Fury was trying to box with Otto Wallin actually had a lot more success in that fight. When Tyson Fury got cut, and when he had to go to war, that's when Tyson Fury started to take over. On the inside, I felt Otto Wallin was second best in terms of a physical sense, and also Tyson Fury was out fighting him on the inside. Don't get me wrong, Otto Wallin still had success, he still got the odd shot off here and there, but once Tyson Fury got aggressive, once he got on Otto Wallin's chest, I felt Otto Wallin was second best. So Dominic Breazeale needs to do his best to impose himself on Otto Wallin, get it up close, and basically try and fight this fight in a phone box and engage Otto Wallin in a war, because he's certainly not going to win a boxing match in this fight. Otto Wallin is clearly the more technical fighter. He comes from a more extensive amateur background and he's got far better fundamentals. So Dominic Breazeale boxing with Otto Wallin to me is a no-go. Dominic Breazeale needs to be Dominic Breazeale, and again, he can't let the failures against Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder get to his head. He needs to fight his fight, be aggressive, swarm Otto Wallin and see what happens. That's really the only advice I can give to Dominic Breazeale, because we know he can do nothing else. So that's what I believe Dominic Breazeale should do in this fight. Just be yourself, man. Fight, brawl, maul, and make it real fucking ugly. That's what Dominic Breazeale needs to do. As for Otto Wallin, again, he's the more technical fighter. Otto Wallin, he can mix it up at a certain level, but to me in this fight, I want to see Otto Wallin utilise those legs. I actually believe Otto Wallin's got pretty good footwork. He's got a nice jab out of that southpaw stance. He's got a nice high guard, a pretty good understanding of defence. He does all of the basics well, Otto Wallin. He's not the quickest guy in the world. He's not the most dynamic guy in the world. He doesn't hit the hardest, but you know, he does the basics well, and he needs to utilise that in this fight. I want to see Otto Wallin primarily box behind that jab out of that southpaw stance, maintain that high guard, maintain range, and just box behind that jab. As we know, Dominic Breazeale doesn't really have much of a jab. He's not the greatest boxer on the outside. Try and maintain range as much as possible in this fight. You know, like I said, Otto Wallin has better technique. He's got better footwork. He needs to be the guy who is boxing behind the jab and making Dominic Breazeale chase this fight. Dominic Breazeale comes forwards with reckless abandonment. His hands are pretty low, doesn't really have a good high guard, doesn't move his head. You know, utilise those straight punches, pop the jab, and step away from Dominic Breazeale's power hand. And also I want to see Otto Wallin work Dominic Breazeale's body. Dominic Breazeale is the pressure fighter. One of the best ways to domesticate a pressure fighter is working that body, slow him down. And Otto Wallin actually works the body relatively effectively. I actually felt Otto Wallin done some pretty good body work against Tyson Fury. That's one thing people don't do against Tyson Fury, is work that body. He's open to the body, and Otto Wallin had success there. I want to see Otto Wallin sustain a body attack against Dominic Breazeale. He's a tall, fat guy. You know, work that body, test his cardio, slow him down, make it a real kind of hard affair for him. You know, make him reluctant or unable to apply that pressure. But yeah, ultimately, Otto Wallin is the boxer in this fight, and he needs to utilise those technical advantages. Don't get engaged in a war with Dominic Breazeale. One thing I noticed about Otto Wallin in his last fight against Travis Kaufman, he won every single round in that fight, by the way, but he was far too eager to make a statement. He was far too eager to impress the American audience. In this fight, just box behind that jab, use those technical skills, and I'm sure the win will come for Otto Wallin. I just don't want to see him get engaged in that sort of war with Dominic Breazeale where he's trading shots, going shot for shot kind of thing, because, listen, Dominic Breazeale is extremely limited, but he's one of those guys. If you're not good enough and you engage this guy in a war, a battle of attrition, he can beat you. Again, as we saw with Izzy Agono and Amir Mansour, those guys were more athletic and, dare I say, had more ability than Dominic Breazeale. They just fought dumb fights and they got beat for it. So Otto Wallin, utilise that jab, utilise those legs, utilise that high guard, and he should win this fight. But yeah. Ultimately, my prediction in this fight is Otto Wallin on points. I don't believe Otto Wallin hits hard enough to knock out Dominic Breazeale. Dominic Breazeale has only been knocked out by Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, arguably the two biggest punchers in the heavyweight division. So I don't really see Otto Wallin knocking out Dominic Breazeale unless his chin's completely gone. I can't really see it, but I do see Otto Wallin winning a competitive unanimous decision over Dominic Breazeale. That's my official prediction. Otto Wallin on points, unanimous decision in a relatively competitive fight. But share your thoughts below. What do you make of this fight? Who are you picking? Are you picking the favourite, Otto Wallin, or do you go with the underdog, Dominic Breazeale? Share your thoughts below. Peace.